So, hello and welcome to another one of these fairly regular Sunday evening lives that I've been trying to do. This one's going to be a follow-up to a live I did about 3 or 4 weeks ago with the wonderful Meri Meroutian. I know I asked her how to pronounce it last time, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly this time, Meri. Who some of you may know from her work on Instagram as the non-native speaker. An attention-grabbing and really kind of powerful and provocative name to be going under on Instagram, I think. Those of you who follow her work will see the kind of endless stuff she's doing to challenge a lot of the myths and the nonsense around this kind of ongoing privileging of native speakers. So what we're going to be talking about today, once Meri joins us, is a little bit more about some of the myths around, the supposed superiority of native speakers. And we're going to be looking a little bit at why we think those things are myths. And we're going to be talking a bit about some of the work Meri does to challenge native speakerism and to challenge discrimination against non-native speakers, and to basically kind of talk a little bit as well about what you can do to counter this kind of thing. So Meri has just asked to join. Let me just check. Let me try again. That should work. Let's see. Hey, Meri.
Hello there.
Hello.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, sorry, we kind of got curtailed last time, yeah?
Yeah, I had no idea what happened, but
I can't remember either. How are you doing anyway?
Good. Thanks a lot. It's getting darker quite sooner every day.
I know. It's kind of, you feel that kind of hurtling towards the shortest day of the year, yeah?
Totally, which we hate over here in sunny Italy. Still, we hate it over here when it's like that.
See,
I see you have a book that's got the Armenian colors in the background there. Is that a tribute or? Yeah.
No, it wasn't intended. It's actually a book of Ukrainian writing and poetry.
There you go.
But hey,
got the Armenian flag colors.
Well, it's an added bonus in that case.
Exactly. How are you doing?
I'm okay, thank you. I'm okay. I mean, I quite enjoy the autumn and the winter and the cold and the dark, being a strange northern person. So, this is actually my favourite time of year.
Oh, okay.
I'm that weird
to each their own.
Hey.
Of course.
So, I know that you're on a limited time frame today, so I guess we should just kick off with kind of where we left off. For those of you who didn't watch the last time we did one of these, we talked a little bit about this kind of nonsensical idea that the natives know the language better, okay? And we talked about why that's a kind of fallacy. So yes. I think what I'd like to do, Meri, is I've got 2 or 3 more common myths that I often hear native speakers clinging onto, okay? Yeah. And I'm going to just throw them out at you and let you answer them however you want. So another thing that I often hear is natives know the culture. This makes them better teachers.
Yes, of course. I'll tell you why I think that this is so untrue, because many people do think, and I get it, like I understand where you might be coming from if you think that, language is tied to culture. I was born in Armenia, right? I lived the first 6 years of my life in Armenia. However, I didn't grow up there, but even if I did, I grew up a bit all over the place. So when I was little, we traveled. I've lived in Moscow, I lived in Buenos Aires, in Kuala Lumpur, in Bangkok, in San Diego, in Rome, in the southern parts of Italy, and now I'm in the northern part of Italy. So to say that, by being born into a culture or in a specific, if you grow up in one place, or you have been, classical born and raised in one city, one country, it still doesn't give you the insight as to what the culture, yes, you might know the popular culture, but then, there are certain studies, like when you go to university, you can choose to study specific cultures. right?
Yeah.
And they can be different from your own. I personally am always schooled by people who come to visit Parma because I'm not very, I haven't visited Parma as a tourist would, right?
Yeah.
And so I find that people who come to Parma and I say, oh, I'll show you around, they seem to know more than I do. And so I feel like, yeah, I might know a bit of culture as, you know, I've lived here, I eat the food that they eat, but cultural studies are like a parallel world if you have to consider if we have to consider language teaching as well. And most people that I know who live in their own culture and who haven't traveled, who haven't had, you know, this broad experiences of, they haven't gotten to know their own culture that well. So it's like expecting an Armenian to teach you about Armenian culture. I wouldn't be able to do that either, I'm afraid. At university I studied European literature and American literature. So, you know, and that is another thing on its own, right? It's not the culture still. You might know of all the literature of all the writers and the authors and everything, but it still will not give you, because it's constantly evolving. There isn't like one nation in the culture, and there is a lot to unpack. So ultimately, if you think that, you know, you need to be from a specific country to be able to teach that language, and along the language comes culture, I think that's a fallacy. I do not believe that that is something that, unless you directly have dedicated, again, time and effort to study that culture that you are going to you intend to teach, I wouldn't say just because you speak a language or you're born in a place, you can automatically teach its culture. It just does not work that way.
It's funny because one of the conversations I often have when I see natives make this claim that, you know, I know the culture, I ask, well, does that mean you think you can teach the culture? And they say yes. And so I say, well, if you can teach it, that means non-natives can learn it. And if non-natives can learn it, surely that means some non-natives have already learned it. So, you know, either it's teachable and learnable or it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing is, I guess I'd add two things to what you said. I think, what do we mean when we talk about the culture anyway? Like, whose culture? Because the
Exactly.
culture I grew up with and what my understanding of my, you know, I can tell you about my English culture and my England, and that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be completely different to someone else's English culture and their England.
Totally.
Um,
Yes.
and you know, we're all limited by our own kind of little worlds. I think on top of that, it's not what I'm doing when I'm teaching English, because the vast majority of English that I'm teaching doesn't exist only in the space of the English cultural realm. You know, it's just to do with meaning, and it's just to do with applicability. And I think where you do
Totally.
have things that are incredibly culturally specific and require cultural knowledge, that's not stuff that you should be doing on an English language course anyway. You know, that's like
No, but it's strange, you
British.
know, how it's still tied to that so much. Like when you buy an English book, it will have the Union Jack on it, it will have, you know,
Yeah,
the double-decker buses, and it will be sold to you like you're learning this language in order to travel to the UK or to speak. And it's so weird because we know for a fact that English is used all over the world, but we're still very surprised when people are like, "Oh, I speak English." Oh, yes? How come? Like, what do you mean, how come? You know, but we still have that thing, and we still adopt most schools still have this kind of ancient, I would call that, because I think course books need to be updated on a regular basis, and like almost every 2 years already, because we've been, you know, traveling at the speed of light in terms of
yeah,
materials and resources, right? And for the past 10 years, I mean, if you're using a book from the 2000s, you're already outdated at this
yeah,
point, right? Because we have the tendency to think, oh, you know, we're in the 21st century and everyone is up to date. It doesn't tend to be so. And these things, these messagings we see or look at, and, you know, we kind of tend to store this information in our head, and then it messes with our mind as to how we think of things,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
It's very
absolutely.
strange how we think that one, it has to be associated to the other. And I don't understand this, you know, riding this wave of, yes, I am culturally, you know, once my colleague said, let's introduce sterling pound in a lesson, and do you have any sterling in your house? And I was like, I'm Armenian, I wouldn't have it. But what is the point of introducing, you know, something? Yeah. but you know, sometimes it's not necessary to speak about a currency of a country, rather than when it's not a must, like it doesn't matter. And that is the kind of thing that really excludes non-native English speakers, because they don't feel like their cultures can be included within the lesson, right? Because they're like, oh, what do I bring Armenian drum, or what? No one is going to care about my culture, because everyone wants to, you know, get themselves into that broader thing of London, New York. And so it's like the hierarchy of cultures begins to take place, like whose culture is more relevant in the current context.
And I think connected to that, there's also a kind of, there's a hierarchy even within English speaking cultures, where what's then prioritized and privileged is this kind of white upper middle class Southern English kind of world. And you know, working class Glaswegian is sort of looked down on as being a weird accent, let alone Jamaica or, you know, Bangladesh or whatever. And there's then this kind of hierarchy of native speakers that emerges from that as well, I think.
And you know, another thing to add to that is, like, when you are from the country, like I now live in Italy, I do understand the dialects and the different varieties of regional dialects, right? And I know which ones are considered to be like lesser than and more, you know, the hierarchy of accent. We know that they exist everywhere. But it's so absurd to me when someone who is a total foreigner to the language, like learners of English, right? And they tend to have this preference. I had so many people reach out to me, oh, I know nothing, they will speak to me in Italian, I know not, I haven't studied it well, I have to start from the ABC, I don't know anything about the English language. And but which variety do you teach? As if that would matter, you know, in their case, in their specific case. I'm like, but what does that matter to you? Like I don't need to have a specific accent to be teaching you, you know, up to what, I would say up to C2 level, you know, it doesn't matter which accent. But if you are so conscious about people's accents and you're afraid of catching it like a disease, you know, just adopt a bit of a critical thinking approach and think about, why do you have these specific preferences, especially when you're not so familiar. Like, to the untrained ear, someone might sound like a native speaker, someone might not sound like one, but exactly where are these people, you know, where can you...
years to notice. I mean, when I'm listening to interviews, I still find it almost impossible to place people according to their accents.
Absolutely.
You know, really, really difficult.
But because we have been traveling ourselves and we have been influenced ourselves, like the journeys that our accents take. Being a teacher already changes your accent, because you speak in a more intelligible way to your students, one would presume, you know. But it's something that
you touched on another myth, which is this idea that somehow students learn their teachers' accents. And you know, I mean, it's a complete nonsensical idea. I've had students who've been in London 3 years. I've taught them for 3 years, 3 hours a week or whatever. And at the end of the course, they still sound German, or they still sound French, or because that's how it works, you know. And they didn't manage to catch my accent through closeness or proximity or hearing. So I think, again, it's a myth. So
I read somewhere very long ago. I read somewhere not very long ago that I can't remember, so don't ask me where I read this, but it is based on mostly of how much you actually love the culture and the people, of how close you can actually, because it's not something like you tend to mimic them because you want to sound, it's not something like that. When it comes from a healthy place, it's just something like your love for the language brings you automatically to kind of adapt and integrate with the speakers and how those specific people speak from a certain...
And every now and then...
But it's a love for the language that actually brings to that. But some people might love everything, or use the English language, but keep their own accent, and that is totally fine as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do get those students. I mean, I had a Japanese guy once who, when I first met him, sounded like he'd sort of learned from Jamaicans. And as we got talking, he was a huge reggae fan, and he'd lived in Kingston for 2 years, and he'd spent loads of time hanging out with Jamaicans. And his whole English was influenced by the music he was into and place he'd lived in. And so I think you do get those people as well, and that's lovely for them. But those are the exceptions rather than the rule, I think.
Totally. Totally. It is an exception because you are not supposed to like park your culture, your belonging, your roots on the sideline. Like, no, I don't care so much about it. Now I'm going to, because automatically you cannot be liked by everyone. B, not everyone is going to perceive your accent to be the most intelligible. So you have to become what I call this kind of global communicator when you, yes, adapt your speech or your intelligibility or how fast you go about your daily discourse depending on who your audience is or who you're talking to, and that is what makes a true, for me, global communicator, because you have all these all, all these concepts in mind when you are discussing about something, or when you're meeting new people that might not have common, what you would presume to be common knowledge based off of where you were brought up or your own context. But always kind of almost like be a writer when you don't have to take anything for granted. Like your audience shouldn't know anything that you assume they should be aware of. And so speak in a way that it's easy to comprehend and you're trying to facilitate. But I think that's a kind of a feature that teachers have, right? When you are actually a teacher, you know how to grade your language speak, but it's not always that. Therefore, I'm kind of thinking about this, I'm delivering these master classes because I don't see many teachers adopt those strategies that are like moderating or facilitating their audience that much.
So the next thing that I'm often told is the customer is always right. And if the customer wants a native, then the customer should have a native. And who are we to argue with what the customer wants? How do you deal with that one?
I feel very strongly about that one because I always say it's not the customer, especially in education. When you go to an expert, if you go to a lawyer, you go to someone that you're willing to pay good money for some sort of education. And I don't agree with the thing, teachers, it's a vocational job that, we are happy just by teaching and there's no need to pay teachers fairly. And I don't agree with that at all. And I think that language teachers, the ones who are not improvised, again, should be treated fairly and with equity and be given their right earnings and pays. And there shouldn't be I'm going to touch on this topic because there is a big issue with English language teaching, because we know that native speakers normally are paid more and non-native English speaking teachers are paid less, and it's absurd and unfair, to say the least. So the idea that people should have their preference and then have someone else who has no concept of the profession dictate whether it is to a school or to a center manager or someone, and complain and want or a specific accent or a specific teacher. I blame those people who are answering back that they do treat the client as king or the client as the master of everything. I understand that financially speaking, we do want to earn a living and have an income and whatnot, but I don't think it would be, all would be lost if we did educate our audience and deliver a good service rather than expect to tick those boxes, which are totally fake and untrue. Just because you want something, I'm going to say it's the equivalent of you coming to me trying to buy a suit, and I want to sell you a suit, and even though I know and this suit doesn't go, and we're about, that's the perfect fit for you, yes, why don't that's exactly, I think, the analogy here, of you are being false, you are not delivering what you're supposed to deliver, and better, and you're kind of playing on the insecurities of the customer and the unawareness, and you don't want to be doing or wasting your time informing your client before selling them the service that they might not want but they actually need.
Yeah. And so the last one that I've often encountered kind of follows on from this, which is that you're just bitter and resentful and you're engaging in reverse discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
That well, old classic.
Yeah, I mean that's the first thing people think, right? I had that a lot on social media when I comment on someone's this kind of, oh, I'm a native speaker, blah blah blah, and as soon as I do, oh, especially with like Italian posts, this happens when someone starts criticizing a speaker, and then they evaluate any person with an accent, and then the comments go, oh yeah, this sounds like my teacher at high school. This sounds like my teacher in. And as soon as I say something about it, yeah, I would like to hear your accent. I can imagine how bitter you are because you would love to be in it, but you will never will be. You never will be that. Like, okay, fair enough. I don't feel like I personally, like if you're saying this to me, at this stage, I don't feel attacked. I just realized that this response comes from a place of ignorance, and ignorance more often than not is bliss for the person who is saying these things. But this unawareness, you can lead the horse to water, as they say, but if someone is unwilling to educate themselves or to just go a bit deeper before making these comments, what can we tell them, right? What can we tell them? So I still have like some of those comments that I made in the past where I still get like people that, oh, yes, you wouldn't say that if you were a teacher. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so I'm not a teacher, whatever. And I don't engage, let's say, with people who I know haven't taken even the time to look who they're talking to or to understand where the perspective is coming from. I try not to be negative in my response always, because that would make me sound bitter, as one might say.
Well, it's an easy sort of circular trap to fall into, yeah.
Yes, and I've gone past that stage where I'm like, oh, look at my qualifications. I have this and this and this and this. I'm like, okay, don't just be on your way. Again, if you're not willing to educate yourself, again, I will not be, forcing things down your throat, so to speak, as a, oh, go. And instead, if I see that there's an honest, sometimes I get comments who are very much into like, why do you say this? Or I think of it in this way, like, would that make me this? Or, talking about it like a
Yeah, then you can
dialogue.
have an exchange, yeah. Yeah.
Then I can have an exchange. But I don't feel like when people just call you bitter, I think it's their own insecurity that plays something there, plays a big part in that, and then so they tend to lash out on you without knowing any sort of context. It's not personal, so I don't take it personal.
If it makes you feel better, I've had it a fair few times myself where I've commented on things, and I've had other non-native speakers saying to me, like, if you try hard, you too can get a good job. Just because you're not a native doesn't mean you can't succeed. And it's like, oh, is it? Oh, thanks for schooling me there, mate. I really appreciate that. Thank you. So
Yeah,
I mean,
but it tends to get to you. Like, I think especially when you're not used to this kind of, oh my God, you're like, what is
that's
this
the
person,
knee-jerk
actually saying?
response that you can see. Yeah, and I mean,
But yeah,
I
I
think
think that's the toll you have to pay for putting your content out there for everyone to see. And so many people will come with a lot of hate, and they might have their point of view might actually justify what they're saying, but they haven't really understood where you are coming from. And so you just leave it there, or you try to interact with it when you see that there is the possibility of actually changing someone's mind or getting into a discussion or understanding more, not only like to get people to thinking things in your own way, but to just have a dialogue, a constructive, sort of an exchange of opinions. And then if you can get there, yes. But I think a lot of non-native teachers do not speak up about things because they are afraid of this in particular.
yeah. Well, and they've seen the kind of the
Yeah.
verbal lashings that other people get, and they're probably quite keen not
Yeah.
on themselves.
Yes, and when you if you make a mistake while
Yeah,
typing out something, they
exactly.
will lash out even more, and you're like, oh geez, I wasn't writing an essay here. We're on social media, but I can't make any punctuation mistakes. I can't make any, and immediately people will be, oh, this is the correct way. I'm like, okay.
I get the same.
It's
I put out rushed social media things in the morning, and there'll be someone who picks up on you made a mistake. It's like, yeah, do you know what? It actually happens sometimes. People make mistakes sometimes. It's like,
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess we've covered most of the main myths that are used to kind of prop up the privileged status that native speakers get.
Mhm.
What I wanted to ask you next was really what triggered you to sort of start fighting back, and what can people do to resist this kind of thing? Because I'm guessing most people watching on my live page will understand that, you know, native speakerism is a bad thing,
Yes.
and the privileging of native speakers is not healthy. I mean, it's not healthy not only for non-natives, so-called, but it's not healthy for native speakers either, because it gives you a kind of false and inflated sense of your own competence and superiority,
Totally.
which I think is not a healthy thing either. What do you
No, you
go
know,
on? Sorry, go on.
no, I was thinking because you mentioned a lot of things that I wanted to expand on a little bit, because this privilege that people carry with them, it's also because no one has ever said
Yeah,
no
yeah,
to a person who has, you know, on their CV written under skills, I'm a native speaker and I want to be da da da, because they know, you know, specific points of the year people are looking for jobs and teaching jobs and whatnot, and so they know, people know, non-teachers as well know that this is an asset if they can use it, you know, to their favor, of saying that, you know, I'm a native speaker, and they can actually get hired. So the discriminatory practice is there. People know about it. People see how things are being marketed currently. And so they are trying to exploit and take advantage of the fact that this is what people seem to be demanding. So it's a vicious circle. It's very hard to get out of when it comes to that. But personally, what got me fighting it, to answer your question, was that I was refused to teach English as a second language at a university here in Parma. And this was after I had kind of built my self-esteem. And when that happened again, after yet another teaching qualification that I had very, you know, I worked very hard to achieve, I just could not believe my ears of what I was hearing. Things like, oh, well, you're not the candidate we were looking for. You're not as international as we would. And everything was conducted in Italian, and I wasn't allowed to speak Italian. Sorry, speak in English, because I came in saying, you know, buongiorno, blah, blah. So they conducted the interview in Italian. And when I wanted to switch, because it was too late, because they kind of placed me as Italian, and there was no convincing them that my English could have been better or even at the same level as my Italian. It was just like, oh, you're Armenian, and I couldn't get the Armenian out of their head. I couldn't even convince them, look, I'm Armenian, but I'm speaking Italian with you. Nothing could be said. And so I was sent on my way. And I was so angry. I was so angry. I just couldn't believe that I had to even hide my roots, hide my identity, hide my nationality. It felt so bad. I can't begin to describe like how you feel powerless, you know? You feel like, oh, there's nothing I can achieve.
yeah.
And that really gives you a hard time kind of trying to. And so I really kind of insulted myself. I thought, why the heck did you even try so hard, or, you know, go get those qualifications? It was so like a waste of time, when all you're trying to do is convince yourself that you can be a good teacher, and you know that you are, right? But I'm trying to, you know, overcompensate and get all these things for people to actually look at my CV, and people are not looking at my CV. People are just stopping at those first lines. And that's where I said, you know, I'm going to start telling, the first thing I'm going to tell about myself is not, I'm an English teacher. I'm Armenian, or, you know, I don't care to be sponsoring myself or avoiding to say that I'm a non-native speaker. So that's what I'm going to call myself. I'm going to be the non-native speaker, and, you know, advertise myself as such. And people are going to still want to work with me and learn from me, no matter, you know, I'm not going to hide my identity. Full stop.
But
And it has worked very, very well for me, actually. A lot of people resonate with that. Some people say you shouldn't, you know, kind of carry with this dichotomy. It's really bad and outdated. But it's not outdated if I'm being
yeah,
discriminated currently on this.
exactly.
And if I had been a marketing genius, this would be the worst strategy in the world. So if you can't see past the idea that I'm trying to convey here, that it's okay to be a non-native speaking teacher and a non-native speaker in general of any language, then you're not getting the point. My point is just to normalize this, And instead of calling myself Meri, Mary, you know, it's Meri, and I'm not hiding my identity, and I'm not hiding the fact that I'm from Army. I'm not hiding anything. It's just me.
So thank you for describing the impact it had on you, because I think for a lot of native speakers, it's not something people stop and think about until they're confronted with other people's experiences and realities. You know, in the same way as, I mean, my elderly white father, when he was alive, always used to say things like, I don't think there's much racism in this country. And I'd have to sort of explain that maybe he hadn't been on the receiving end of it for obvious reasons. And I think, you know, natives often just don't understand the impact that these practices have on people. So I've kind of got two more questions for you, Meri, okay?
Sure.
What one is, I mean, a lot of what you do involves putting yourself out there and kind of creating waves, and I'm sure that in the process of that you piss some people off. And I wonder, how do you deal with it emotionally? Like what's the impact on you emotionally doing that? Because it must be, I mean, I look at it and think it must be draining.
Yeah, good question, because I had people who were like advocates alongside me, and they actually gave up.
Yeah,
They like, okay, I
well,
can't do this
yeah,
anymore. It takes an emotional toll, and I'm criticizing them, and I'm not judging them, honestly. I'm just saddened by it, because I think that the more people fight this actively, the sooner we'll get out of it. And I do believe that it will lead to, you know, people being more. I want, you know, you can fight the prejudice that people have in their minds, but at least explicitly they won't be saying it out
yeah,
loud. It takes very little for people to say, oh, we're looking for English teachers, and then doing the discrimination behind closed doors and choosing the native speaker, right? But we haven't even come to the point where people are hiding or concealing the fact that they are prejudiced.
yeah,
So this is how bad it is currently. Like they can't not put an advertisement that says we're looking for teachers. They have to explicitly say they're looking for native teachers.
yeah,
And I'm like, why would you say that? You know, it's unlawful in so many countries, and you
yeah,
still have to mark it that way,
yeah,
right? So it makes you think of how big this thing is and how people don't care. Emotionally, it was draining for me at the start, because I really wanted to, I was really putting my heart and soul into it, and trying to educate people and trying to get people to see it my way. Today, I would say, after actively like being an advocate and doing conferencing and whatnot, after 3 years, I'm very much chilled out about it. I'm still passionate about it. Like, the passion is still there. But I don't, like I said before, I don't take offense if someone doesn't see it the same way yet, or like many people have not been on the receiving end of it. So fair enough, they might not see it that way. But when I do piss people off and they feel like telling me something, I can either block them if they are harassing me. It has happened twice, I think, in these 3 years.
yeah. Not
And
bad,
there were people that,
not bad.
how
To
bad? Well, one was verbally attacking me, and his name was Bobby or something like that. And people were really engaged with that, because he really publicly was trying to humiliate me. But then one of my followers actually tracked him down and realized that he was like running a scam activity as if he was an English language school, which he didn't have. And he was really angry at
who
me
could
for ruining his business. He had like 130 followers, you know. Not that it counts, because maybe in real life he had more, but that's not his case. And he was just saying that I'm ruining his reputation by saying that he advertises himself as a native speaker, when actually he's something like that. Where all I did was just explicitly say to him that the ad that he was running or whatever he was doing was in fact discriminatory.
yeah.
So yeah, he disappeared. I don't know where he went. I guess I didn't engage with him anymore, so that got lost. And another one was another university of Italy. I don't actually remember the details there, but it was like, yeah, they promoted like all our teachers are native teachers, blah, blah, blah. And I said, this is discriminatory, and I flagged them. I put it on LinkedIn, but they're like advertising it themselves. And so I got a long, like about 2 days after that, I got a long Instagram direct message saying that they were going to pursue with legal action and, you know, come after me for saying, I was like, I literally reposted your own thing. And then I gave them the whole legal aspect of things, of how that was discrimination in terms of legally speaking, that it was against European laws and Article 21 of the fundamental rights. You know, I was like, this is wrong on so many. So I said, if you're going to take action, I'll have my lawyers call your lawyers and we'll see what. And that person just disappeared, vanished into nothingness. So I think that when you are from like an informed perspective, and I know many people wouldn't want to go down that road as in, oh, you know, it creates a lot of anxiety. It does create a lot of anxiety. Like I have, if I had told my husband, for instance, he was like, oh, take it down. Why would you get involved in this? But this is the point. Why should I be afraid of acting from an honest, true, legal perspective? I'm not saying anything that is wrong. They are saying something that is illegal. Yeah. The law is on my side, you know, and I'm willing to take on, you know, these people who think that they are above the law and who can intimidate me with false, you know, accusations of what have I actually done. You know, if not, I'm giving you extra publicity if we have to look at it from a point of view of, because I'm not saying anything you aren't saying yourself, you know. So if I say it, it's not okay, but if you say it, it's publicity. I don't know.
Before I ask my last question, I'll just say a quick thing. For people out there who are watching and who don't follow Meri online, I mean, please do follow her Instagram. And if you can find her on LinkedIn, follow her. For me, one of the things that I think I first came across was you. I think what appealed to me was the combination of anger and humour I found very appealing, because it's like, you know, I understand those two emotions very well. And you were doing a video of some guy doing this god awful like native speaker thing in front of Buckingham Palace, kind of going, yeah, here I am in front of Buckingham Palace with the Union Jack flapping in the wind behind me. And you just kept stopping it, kind of going, why do I need to see this? Why do I need to know this if I'm a language learner? And I just thought it was so beautifully nailed and so beautifully kind of just.
That was one that got a lot of hate as well, because I got a lot of direct messages saying that I was, like you said, bitter, and that I wish I sounded like him. And I got a lot of direct messages from unknown people saying that, you know, that's what many learners want, and that's a preference, and you should follow it, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, good on you. Just try and imitate, and you're fine, you know. I didn't, but I had like a lot of people instead, you know, relate to it and understand it. And a lot of teachers said, yes, exactly. Why must I always, you know, go with my Union Jacks and flap this in the wind?
I'm saying this as a white English guy living in London who hates all this bullshit as well.
Yeah,
you know, I mean,
and it's what it is. It's BS. And people say, he's such a good teacher. Well, good on you. Go and learn from him. But he is selling you, you know, something that is not true for so many. It's not helping the majority of students. And I definitely know that these people are not, they don't have their students or any people's best interest at heart. They're just trying to play on people's insecurities and get them to buy their very sleazy, generic courses and promise them, you know, great results within 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years. I don't know what not. You know, we see this all the time, and it does piss you off at a certain stage, because you go into those and you see 100,000 followers. And again, I'm not bitter about it. Instagram is Instagram. It's what it is. I use it for humor. Most of my, you know, people that I follow is just for the laughs that they give. It's entertaining, it's fun, it's relatable. I don't follow things that are going to upset me or make me, you know. So, but sometimes when those things come up, how can you not be affected when you actually know the truth behind the story that these people are saying, right? And you know that so many people are actually, oh, great. There's an Italian one too, and she's obnoxious. She keeps telling people about how in Denmark children learn English so much faster, and then Italian kids are not as good. And I'm like, oh, geez, you know, like, what are we even talking about? And so it's like fear mongering, you know, and trying to get Italian parents wanting to adopt, you know, things like total physical response. She's selling as if it was something that she has now created for children. And I'm like, oh my God, people need to really like open their eyes, or have someone.
That is the Danish secret, of course, is TPR. It's the Danes are all about TPR.
Yes. Yes. And like passing it off like her new creation. And how can you not get, you know, worked up about it and say something? How can you? Yes. But many people, they go, oh, I hate her, but then they're whispering it. No, shout it from the rooftops. If you know something to be false, why not help other people come to the realization? You know, we can turn on our cameras too. We can be entertaining and say this, you know, things that are true instead of false news and fake news.
So
You
this
can do it.
is my last question, I guess, which is, what could you give maybe 2 or 3 things that people can do that would help to combat this? And are those things different for so-called native speakers or non-native speakers? What would you like to see native speakers doing more or less of, and what would you like to see non-natives doing more or less of? What do you think people do
It would be
construct?
so different, considering, like, I'm thinking, if you were a teacher, I would say a different thing. If you were a speaker of English, I would say a different thing
Well,
again.
let's go for teachers, because I'm guessing it's majority teachers who are going to be watching this.
Okay, so for teachers, I'd say this. First of all, I believe that the issue comes from acceptance at first. Like, I've done some digging, and I think that if you are still saying things like, I'm an English teacher, but, and using contrasting language, speaking about your own credentials, I think there's something we need to, like, unravel and understand. But I'm not a psychotherapist, but I'll tell you that from my perspective, it always has to do with accents and the shame that comes with having an accent. And that brings on the fact that as a teacher, you tend to shy away from teaching things like pronunciation or speaking about culture, because you don't feel that English totally belongs to you. And so I personally think that if you combat these things, these inferiority complexes you might have about you being the teacher and you teaching higher levels and you teaching your own culture through English, I believe if you tend to shy away from it, and if you, like, face these things head on, you would break that cycle of feeling inferior. And it's not about getting the qualification too, because those things might build a bit of self-esteem, but you're always going to have a naysayer who's going to come and say, but you're not a native speaker, and you can't change that.
Yeah.
It does not matter. You just can't turn back the hands of time and be born in a place where people are going to perceive you as a native speaker. And some job applications, by the way, they tell you, even if you are naturalized or you got the citizen, you're not welcome to apply either. So even when you get a citizenship, they're still going to kick you out of the room, say you don't belong. So once you understand that, I think you get back your power. Personally, that's what I think. Then no one can actually, then you really understand the power that you hold. The fact that you speak more than one language or 2 languages is actually so much more powerful and more impactful for learners and the people who you surround yourself with. So definitely go for that. I don't remember the next question you had for me. That was kind of
it. So it was just kind of, what can people do? I mean, I was thinking about it in terms of what I'd like to see natives do more or less of as well.
Oh yeah, and native speakers need to be supportive, not just verbally. Because a lot of native speakers do understand that, and they're, oh, I support the cause, blah blah blah, and then, like, she really speaks good, even if she's Italian, but her English is good.
Speaks good English.
Yes, you know, oh, you know, and, you know, picking books and looking at the author's name and judging the book not by its cover but the author's name, like these kind of things just tell me that we haven't overcome the bias, and it's just like a lot of talk and inclusivity and diversity and inclusion and blah 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 blah, and it's blah 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 to them, you know. And the first thing I say, oh yeah, give me your CV, let's see how you market yourself. Native speaker, oh, good to see you're not a supporter. So don't fake to be a supporter when you are not, in fact, supporting.
So
it's really important that native speakers speak about it.
And I think it's a really important thing to say is advertising yourself as a native speaker should just not be okay. And, you know, your passport is not a teaching qualification, and your place of birth is irrelevant to your ability to do your job as a teacher. And I think, I mean, every time I see people advertise themselves as native speakers, I kind of wince inside, and I don't think I've ever done it myself, because the idea just never crossed my mind to do it, and it just didn't it didn't really seem relevant to anything. But I see it all the time from other people, and yes, I think it's one thing people could very easily stop doing.
Can I ask you one thing? Have you ever, when you see these things, have you ever said anything to the person directly or indirectly, like saying, this is actually not something you should write on your CV?
Yeah, I do it a lot on Facebook when I see people kind of advertise saying I'm a native speaker with 3 years experience, and I usually just say, good luck looking for a job. By the way, a passport is not a qualification, and then I put a link to that blog post I wrote about native speakerism, and then usually just leave it there. And sometimes some people will get back to you and say, sorry, I hadn't thought about it. And sometimes other people will get really annoyed on their belief and say, you're just bitter and resentful, and if you were a native, you'd do better in your life. And it's like, thanks for the tip.
And then the second cycle of bias comes around when you have to say, no, but I am a native speaker to validate your opinion.
That's where it gets weird, because I don't want to get into that, and it's just like, I'll just leave it. Don't you know who I am?
And then it goes, my grandfather was, and I'm like, what is this, the dog pedigree? Like, who was your grandma? Who cares who your parents and grandparents and, ancestors were? But that's what it comes to, If you see a lot of ads and Facebook groups, they have all these conversations that are weird. Yeah. And they start saying, I lived, or I am, it's geographic, I'm in London, oh, I live here. And that kind of raises their value.
Yeah.
And I just look at it and I'm like, do they really believe this to be true? Or you'll never know, because it's just totally insane what they say out there to get a client. And it just shows you how desperate people are in actual fact of actually getting those students and getting those clients. But I kind of pity them at a certain stage, because I'm like, wow, how desperate must you be to be doing that, right? Like, that's not a skill. What is that a skill? People are putting under skills, they put everything, but no skill is being mentioned anymore.
Yeah. I guess I would also like to see more natives just kind of refusing to work with schools that only have a native-only policy. I'd like to see people who are invited to conferences, if they're invited to do a panel, check that it's not a native-only panel. And I even have little things like on this Facebook group I have, English Questions Answered. About every week, some new person will post saying, what do natives think of this? And I'm happy to answer the question, but usually I always put a kind of preamble thing, which is, can you please not direct questions towards native speakers? It's incredibly disrespectful to the expertise of everyone else. And, even if you ask 10 natives, you're going to get 10 different answers. There is no one fixed answer to this stuff. Please respect people's experience and expertise. Anyway, here's how I'd answer it. Other natives may disagree and other people may agree. Who knows?
It's whatever rocks their boat.
It's easy to do that. And I think it would just be nice if more people did a bit more of that, a bit more proactively, I think.
Yeah. And, I just wanted to say one thing that I always see. People think that when they're aware of it, that's half of the job has been done, just because they're aware of it. No, that's exactly the point. Being aware of it, it's not even half the step that you need to take. Like it just shows you how much you might not care about it while you're being aware, and you're still using either your privilege if you're a native speaker. I'm thinking about native speakers right now who kind of tend to say that. They say, oh, I support it, I'm aware of it, oh yeah, and then they do all the discriminating themselves, and they think that whatever comes out of their mouth is more important and relevant and more correct, so to speak. And that's the perception. I'm not saying that people should not be prejudiced, or that, we all have biases, we all do, but it's that thing of being aware of your bias, not just being, oh yeah, I am biased. No, but actually changing your mind, convincing yourself for a second, listen, you need to control the monkey in there. Just like, don't think of this, you can't be thinking this way. Give people a second, third, fourth, fifth chance, for heaven's sakes. Like it's not the way to go, to just, oh, I'm aware of it. No, take action, take serious action, take the most important, go against your own beliefs sometimes, just to prove yourself wrong. That would be extremely intelligent.
Meri, I know that you said earlier, you texted me and said, can we do 35 to 40 minutes, and we're just hitting 50. And I feel that now you've just said control the monkey mind. That seems like as good a place to finish as any. I think it's a healthy message to send out there into the world, into Instagram Live land. So let's leave it there. I'll thank you for your time, and thank you so much for the work you're doing. And
Thank
let's keep in
you.
touch, and yeah, keep doing what you're doing, because it's great work.
Yes, thank you very much for having me, and I love doing lives with you whenever you want. Whenever you have anything you want to discuss, count me in. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. You take care. Yeah, keep in touch.
To design anything for you. I'm there.
You're showing me up now. Yeah, thank you.
I'm joking. Thanks a lot.
All
Have a
right.
lovely evening.
Take care. Yeah.
Bye all.